guys, and welcome back to She Investigates, the podcast where we investigate all things weird. I'm your host, Gwen Ross, and the story I have for you today is a very poorly planned murder-for-hire plot. But first, let's catch up. Today, I'm going to keep it short because we have a very detailed case today. But pink eye has hit our house again. And the weird thing is that it hit our family this exact same time last year. And the only reason that I know that is because my sister got married a year ago tomorrow. And my husband actually had pink eye at her wedding. So happy anniversary to my sister and her husband. And also happy pink eye anniversary for us. I wish that we weren't celebrating again. But hopefully nobody gets it but my son. I'm crossing my fingers, dousing the house in Lysol, all the things. I am also trying to de-junk my whole house before summer, just so that I can kind of keep my sanity with my kids home. I have really good intentions, but so far, I'm going to be honest, it's not going great. I just really need to organize things better, but I only have 4 weeks left until school is out. And we all know that May is pretty much like December, the sequel, as far as all of the end of school year stuff and events and recitals and all this stuff. So I've got to get my crap together and get this done before, well, I guess May is almost here. Hopefully before May gets here. But I'm getting excited for summer. I'm excited that it's finally warming up around here and hoping to get all my spring cleaning done. I've also heard that you should set goals in the spring when everything's coming back to life after the winter rather than January when everything's dead and it's cold and bleak. And I really like that. So I'm hoping to set some goals for myself, and maybe I'll update you guys on how my New Year's resolutions are going next week, since I did talk about that on another episode, what my resolutions were. But I also want to set some good spring goals and just kind of make some changes as the weather warms up and everything comes back to life. And with that, let's get into today's case. They seemed like the ideal couple. Church-going, business-owning, dog-loving. Amy and Stephen Allwine had it all. Respect in their community, a thriving dog training company, and a son that they adored. But behind closed doors, secrets festered. And online, in the dark corners of the internet, someone was plotting Amy Allwine's death. This is a story about deception, technology, and betrayal so deep that even the closest people to Amy couldn't have imagined the truth until it was far too late. Amy was born in 1972. She was the middle child. She had an older sister and a younger brother, and grew up in a very religious household in Minnesota. Her family were Christian fundamentalists, and they were part of the Worldwide Church of God. They were extremely dedicated to their faith, so much so that the kids couldn't even do extracurricular activities, and they weren't allowed to have friends outside of the church. But despite that, the kids had a very happy childhood. They had lots of friends in the church, and they didn't really feel like they were missing out. Amy was described as generous, faith-driven, and endlessly patient. She was a cheerleader for the church's basketball team, and she attended Ambassador College in Big Sandy, Texas. This was a 4-year liberal arts school that was actually run by the Church of God, and it was meant to prepare the students for life and service in church. Amy Allwine was known for her kindness. She actually met her husband, Stephen Allwine, at that college, and they were both in the IT department. They loved dancing together, and they danced at a lot of the church dances. That's how they kind of got to know each other. While they were in college, the church that they were part of, the Worldwide Church of God, actually split into different sects that had similar values but were different. The United Church of God was one of the sects that came to be from this split, and it's where Amy followed. And it was evangelical, but they very strictly adhered to the Bible. The United Church of God embraced the internet to spread the gospel, which was something that had been different from the Worldwide Church of God. And Stephen, being in IT, loved computers and technology, and this just really spoke to him. So in August 1996, they were married and they moved back to Amy's hometown of St. Paul, Minnesota. And they were both deeply committed to this church and committed to God. They attended church every Saturday. And not only that, they arrived an hour early and stayed for all of the activities after. They didn't celebrate Christmas or Easter as they were considered pagan holidays by the church. And they also traveled a lot, serving different congregations and going on missionary type trips. Stephen became a deacon and Amy became a deaconess of the United Church of God. Stephen went on later to become an elder, and he served as a marriage counselor in the church and a preacher. In 2007, they adopted their only child, which was a son named Joe. And this was an open adoption. They stayed in touch with the birth parents, and the birth parents had actually chosen them because they were unable to have their own children. And they were a very loving and affectionate couple, just incredible parents to their son, Joe. Every Friday night, they had dinner with Amy's family. They seemed like just this perfect little family. In 2011, they moved into a house in Cottage Grove. They had 28 acres of land with a prefab home built on it. It was described by others as a very homey environment. Stephen worked 2 jobs, one as an IT technician and one with a company called Cigna, and both of them were work-from-home jobs. He would work in the basement during the day. And Amy ran a dog training business out of their home as well, which was called Active Dog Sports Training. She offered obedience classes and even therapy dog certification. She also trained dogs for competitions, and her clients just loved her. She'd always loved animals, and the family actually had 2 dogs of their own, so this was just a very natural fit for her. She had converted a large shed on the side of their house into this dog training facility, and she would actually travel around the world to dog competitions. Her own dogs actually frequently competed and won. Her friends said she was never without a huge smile. She was never negative or judgmental, just a very wholesome and good woman. She never tried to push her faith on others, and she had great empathy for others. Her religion was her top priority, and she never attended these dog competitions on Saturday, which was her Sabbath day. Her and Stephen actually spent a lot of their time in the church working with teens, and they also had what I think would be considered like a blog. It was allwine.net. And on this website, they posted about their travels, their family, their missionary work, and kind of just what was going on in their lives. When I was reading through this story and researching for it, I kind of was picturing like Blogspot, if you're old like me and you know what Blogspot was. It was a website where anybody could get a blog and just start writing blog posts about whatever they wanted. And it seemed like back then everybody had blogs, but that's what they had. This is how they like shared their lives with other people. They also had instructional dance videos on their website, as well as a list of approved music that didn't sing about inappropriate things, and this was to show others that they could dance and enjoy music, all while still retaining their values. So, to the outside world, they looked like this textbook example of a strong Christian family. And Amy was especially admired for her integrity and devotion, not just to her church, but also to her family. She homeschooled their son, Joe, and she helped coordinate missionary trips abroad. By all accounts, she was the heart of the Allwine home. But in May 2016, Amy received some disturbing news. Someone wanted her dead. It started out with a knock on the door. Stephen was working from the basement, and when he answered, he was met by FBI agents and an officer from the local police department. They asked to speak with Amy, but she wasn't home at the time, so they made arrangements for Amy to come meet them at the police department. So when Amy and Stephen arrived at the police department for the meeting, they were put in an interrogation room, and they had no idea what this meeting was about. The FBI agents told Amy that her name had surfaced on the dark web, which is a hidden layer of the internet often used for illegal activities. I don't know about you guys, but I had heard the term dark web a lot, but I never really knew what it was or how to access it. Keep in mind, I'm very sheltered. I knew that it was where you would go if you were into illegal stuff or you wanted to purchase drugs. But like I said, I never knew how to access it. And I always just pictured it as websites with a black background. But you actually have to download a system on your computer that will allow you to access websites that you can't access through just your regular internet browser. So this anonymous person had tried to hire a hitman to kill her through a site that was called Besa Mafia. It was a murder for hire operation site. It was basically like a freelance job board for hitmen, and it was linked to the Albanian mafia. It was run by this mysterious Romanian guy named Yura, and users would contact Yura and he would help them find someone to complete the job. And all the payments were done in Bitcoin to try to help keep things secret and anonymous and not be able to trace it back to anybody. So the messages beginning in February of that year were very specific and very graphic. They were from a username that was named Dog Day God, and this person had reached out with a request. One of the messages read, quote, "I'm looking to hire you for a hit, but what is the recommended way to convert cash to Bitcoin anonymously?" End quote. So this person was worried about looking suspicious to authorities, and Euro gave the user many excuses that they could use if they were contacted by the police to explain like the withdrawal of cash that they would need to convert to Bitcoin, such as like gambling, stuff like that. They also gave this user names of Bitcoin converters that didn't need ID. These converters would collect the cash from individuals, convert the cash into Bitcoin, and then transfer the Bitcoin from their account to the individual's account. So you can see how much money was moved from one Bitcoin address to another, but you can't see names that are connected to the account. It's pretty anonymous. So Dog Day God then provided the details of the hit. They included Amy's home address, her daily routine, and even details about her husband and her son. They told Euro that the target would be traveling out of town to Moline, Illinois in March and ask the price of the hit. And they requested that the hit be made to look like an accident. They went back and forth on the price, and prices for these hits started at $5,000, which to me sounds like super cheap. Like you're getting a screaming deal at $5,000. But then adding in like an accidental element would up the price an additional $4,000. So it's like they have like add-on packages. Super weird. But they ended up settling on $6,000, and this was going to be for a lower level gang member to wait at a predetermined location and hit Amy with a stolen car. So after they finally agreed on this price, Dog Day God sent this message, and it says, quote, "Okay, I did some research, and everything that I read says that you are real and can carry out what you say. They say that Bera means trust, so please do not break that. For reasons that are too personal and would give away my identity, I need this be dead, so please help." End quote. And they submitted an order on the website's online order form. Isn't that so just like nuts that you can fill out an order form to take out a hit on somebody's life? Like that just struck me as really crazy. So I want to read some of the messages that were sent back and forth. The first one from Dog Day God is basically just like the information about the hit. And it says, Amy Allwine, she's about 5'6" and looks about 200 pounds. Saturday night, March 19th, she should be staying at La Quinta Inn, Moline Airport. Sunday, March 20th, she's supposed to be participating in a dog trail at the Quad City Christian School. She should be driving a dark green Toyota Sienna minivan. I want her dead. This is the 13 Bitcoins. If it can look like an accident, then you can have the rest. Then the Besa Mafia said, on March 19th, make sure you are surrounded by people most of the day or in public places where they have video surveillance. This way you ensure that no one can ask where you have been on March 19th. If you have a good alibi, they can't do anything else other than say it was an accident and close the case. So March 19th comes and goes, and Amy is still alive. Dog Day God then sent this message. I have not seen anything. Do you know if this is done? The Besa Mafia wrote back, no, not yet. The hitman has followed her, but he did not have the chance to do the hit yet. He needs to be in a position where he can hit her car to the driver door to make sure she dies. So through the course of their messages, they decide that maybe a sniper hit would be better, and that's suggested to Dog Day God. And they assure him that there's a 100% success rate, but it's going to cost him $6,000 more. And Dog Day God just doesn't have the money, so he decides he wants to just keep the original plan of hitting her with a car. But the plan does not go through. Again, they say they could not find a time to hit Amy with the car and make it look like an accident. The Besa Mafia then sends this message. We don't usually ask this because we're not interested in the reason why people are killed. But if she is your wife or some family member, we can do it in your city as well, making it look like an accident or robbery. Then Dog Day God responds, not my wife, but I was thinking the same thing. How much would it be to kill her at home and then burn the house so that they cannot tell if anything was stolen or not? I'm not sure if they have anything worth stealing. This Thursday, I know she will be home between about 9 and noon Central Time. So the Mafia agrees, the Besa Mafia agrees, but they tell him it's going to be an additional 10 Bitcoins to do this whole burning down the house plan, which is equal to about $4,500. And Dog Day God agrees to pay it and sends the money the next day. But again, Thursday comes and goes, and Amy is still alive. The Besa Mafia said they had trouble getting into the property, and they asked for a new time to complete the hit. So Dog Day God sends this message. Okay, I got some more details on her schedule. I'm trying to get as much as I can without being obvious. It looks like she will be home tomorrow from 12 to 1 p.m. and Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. Those are the only times I know about at the moment. Let me know the plan so I can be somewhere else public. I know her husband has a big tractor, so I suspect that he has gas cans in the garage, but I do not know that for sure. She usually drives the Sienna, so if that is there, she should be home. Yes, I want it done, but I have to pretend to be her friend to get this information, and it's driving me crazy to be nice to her. I am also afraid that if I dig for information too many times, that it will look strange. So they reschedule for Monday, but this time, the Mafia member that was assigned to do this hit was actually pulled over while he was driving there, and he had an expired registration. So he was taken to the police station after they discovered that the vehicle that he was driving was also stolen. At this point, Dog Day God has had enough. This has been so much back and forth trying to get this job done that he sends this message. I realize that things happen, but this bee has torn my family apart by sleeping with my husband, who then left me, and is stealing clients from my business. I've had to continue to act like her friend to get information, but I cannot do it anymore. I've gone out of my way to try and get you good information. I feel that I am at risk of being suspected if I ask too many more questions. You have had 3 good attempts at her, and none of them have worked. I liked the idea of shooting and fire because I think that it would look like a robbery and cover-up, but I'm at the point that I do not care how it's done. Then he goes on to say, I believe that if I go about my regular routine, that I will not be a suspect. If I stop asking questions and just act normal. If this is not done in some way by May 1st, then I would like my money back. Does that sound like enough time for you? I cannot get my hopes built up again like I did this weekend. I do not care about the date or method. You have pictures and an address, so you can tail her and do whatever you need to do to get the job done. I ask that you only get her and not the dad or kid, as the kid is a friend of our child, and I do not want to leave him orphaned. I do know that she's going to take a trip to Atlanta the weekend of April 7th to 10th, but I do not know the details. I also was passing by recently when they had the garage door open and was able to see that they have 3 5-gallon gas cans just outside the door from the house to the garage, and what looked like a propane tank as well. I'm not sure if any of them are full, but they are there. Thanks for your help with this. I need her out of my life so I can move on. So he had set this date of, I need this done by May 1st. And you guessed it, May 1st comes and goes, and Amy is still alive and well. So on the 20th of May, I'm not sure why he waited so long, but on the 20th of May, Dog Day God sends this message. That's it. Your local guys suck. They cannot do simple things even when given plenty of time. I will try again later with one of your pros, but I'll need to save up for that. Can you give me a quote of what I will need to work with a pro? And then I will try to get a new order worked up in a couple of months. Until then, please refund my money. So he wants a refund. He's not happy with the customer service. And the Mafia actually responds to him by telling him that their website has been hacked. And unless he sends another 10 Bitcoin, all the messages that they have had back and forth are going to be handed over to the police. And this message actually occurred just 1 week before the FBI showed up on Amy and Steven's doorstep. So the Besa Mafia really had been hacked, and all their information had been released onto the internet, including tons of usernames of people that were paying for hits. And Amy's hit was hit number 30312. The FBI took all this information and they started contacting people to warn them of the hits that had been taken out on them. And it turns out that the Besa Mafia and Euro were all just a giant scam. They had never carried out any of these hits that they were hired and paid for, but their quote-unquote customers really couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't contact the police and say, this hit never happened and this person still has my money. So the FBI did genuinely believe that somebody was seriously attempting to have her killed, and somebody that knew her intimately. They also claimed that they had a rival dog training business and that Amy was stealing their clients and that Amy had slept with their husband. So after learning all of this from the FBI, Amy and Stephen were just shocked. They could not believe it. First of all, Amy had never had an affair, and they couldn't think of a single suspect. Like I mentioned before, she was such a nice person and had so many friends and was just friends with everybody. So it was distressing to know that somebody had paid all of this money just to have her killed. And the only lead that they had was in one of the messages. Dog Day God had said that if Amy died, they'd inherit her business, which was worth $50,000. But when the police asked Amy, Amy said nobody was set to inherit the business, and none of the people that she worked with were under that assumption either. So her and Stephen are asked to put together a list of people that they may consider handing the business over to if something did happen to Amy, as well as a list of colleagues. But all of them were ruled out by the police pretty quickly. So the police then ask Amy to make a list of every person in her life. Can you imagine making this kind of list? Trying to think of every person that's part of your life. And she finally got it down to a list of about 100 people. And the police started looking into them. But Amy, she really didn't have an enemy in the world. So there just wasn't anything to go on and no clear suspect. There was no digital trail. There was just a terrified woman and this shadowy online plot. So the police gave her their contact information and they basically suggested that she get a security system and then she was sent on her way. And obviously she was shaken, but she didn't let it paralyze her. She installed new locks, she got security cameras, and she basically followed every suggestion that was made by the FBI. She leaned on her faith and her husband and her community, and life kind of returned to normal. Amy was still doing the dog training, and she didn't really tell anybody about what happened with the FBI, not even her family, because she was worried that they were just going to be worried about her. And so the only people that Amy talked to about it was her sister and her best friend Sharon. Amy was just trying to move on with her life, and that was kind of hard because daily tasks now were terrifying because she had no idea who to trust. They already owned a shotgun and a rifle, but at this time they also purchased a 9mm handgun that was kept in a safe, and that safe could only be opened by Amy's fingerprint. Instead of doing normal things on date night like dinner and a movie, they went to the gun range and practiced shooting in case they ever actually had to use this gun for protection. She even became really good friends with one of the agents that had worked on her case just a few months prior, Agent Silky, and they talked frequently about her fear and her anxiety. And on July 31st, she contacted Agent Silky because Dog Day God had reached out again by email. She had received an email that was from somebody named Jane, and it says, Amy, your family is in danger. Last Sunday, you received an email with the solution to this problem, and you have not done anything about it yet. Are you so selfish that you will put your family's lives at risk? If you did not see the email, then check your junk mail soon. So Amy checked her junk mail, and she found the following email, again, from somebody named Jane, but it was very obviously Dog Day God. It says, Amy, I still blame you for my life falling apart. I do not know how a fat bee like you got a husband, but because of you, he left and my life has become crap. I'm sending you this email because it looks like you already know about me. I see that you have put up a security system now, and I've been informed by people on the internet that the police were snooping around my earlier emails. I have been assured that the emails are untraceable and they will not find me, but I cannot attack you directly with them watching. Here's what's going to happen. Since I cannot get to you, I will come after everything else that you love. I know about your son, your husband, and your business. And thanks to the internet, I see you have a mother and husband in Woodbury, a brother in St. Paul, and a sister in Yardley, PA. I have been busy researching topics on the internet and have found that if you inject water into the brake line, then you will cause them to fail. What would happen if the brakes on your truck failed when your husband was hauling a heavy load? I found how to blow up a gas meter and make it look like an accident. I know that the meter on your house and on your business are on the east side, and the meter on your parents' house is on the south side. I'm still watching you and your family, and while I did not see your son this week, I saw last Friday he was wearing a bright pink shirt. I see that you moved the RV. Here is how you can save your family. Commit suicide. If you do not, then you will slowly see things taken away from you, and each time you will know that you could have stopped it, which will eat you apart from the inside. By the time I'm done, you will want to end it anyways, so why not do it now and save them? Remember, if you do not get it right the first time, then you will likely be committed for mental health issues and you will lose your business and possibly your family. So I would pick a reliable method. I think it is an easy choice. 1 life to save 6 lives. Your family does not need you, but you can save them. Do not tell anyone about this email or the deal is off and I will come after your family. You've seen that the police are not able to track my earlier emails, but I was informed of them searching. They will not be able to track this either, but I will know if they look into it. Unless you are a heartless, selfless bee, then I expect to see your obituary in the paper in the next couple of weeks. Wow. Can you even imagine getting this email and what your response would be? It's just crazy. So she took that to this agent Silky, and the FBI took this threat very seriously. They found that the email had come from a disposable email service, which kept the sender anonymous. So they took Amy and Steven's phones and computers and copied them before returning them a few days later, but they didn't find anything noteworthy. And the FBI actually thought that these emails were a de-escalation. The killer was no longer hiring someone, and it seemed like they didn't want to do the job themselves, since they were basically encouraging Amy to take her own life. And that just wasn't something that Amy was willing to do. I mean, she loved her family, they needed her, and it was also against her religion to take her own life. And like we talked about, she was extremely religious. So Amy was understandably very scared. A few weeks later, she actually enrolled in the Citizen Police Academy, which was an 8-week program. And she told no one, not even the officers running the course, about these threats on her life. Throughout the course, they practiced shooting guns, fingerprinting, and they even did a ride-along. And Amy asked to accompany a canine officer during her ride-along, and she loved being able to share her dog training knowledge with that officer. And fun fact, I'm actually planning to do the Citizens Academy in my own city this fall, which I'm super excited about. And don't worry, I'm going to tell you guys all about it on the podcast. But anyways, even with all of this information that she learned at the Citizens Academy, she was still very fearful. She began having frequent migraines, memory trouble, and she had anxiety about teaching her dog training classes because she didn't know if any of the people that were coming wanted her dead and maybe in one of her classes. So in October of 2016, the Allwines went to Germany for the United Church of God's Fall Festival. And those who saw her at this festival said Amy seemed to be feeling a lot happier and relaxed. She was just glad to be so far away from these threats and to be able to be free from this concern while on this trip to a whole other country across the world. On November the 12th, the family attended church back together in Minnesota. And on November the 13th, Stephen woke up early before 6 a.m. and went to the basement to work. He joined Amy and their son Joe for lunch later in the day. And after lunch, Amy put a pumpkin in the slow cooker for dinner. After this, Amy started to not feel very good. She was really dizzy and she went to lie down. Her dad actually came by later in the day because he was going to be installing a dog door in the garage. While he was there, he never saw Amy. He was informed by Stephen that she wasn't feeling good and she was resting. After he left, he actually got a call from Stephen saying that Amy was a lot worse. And he was worried, so he was going to take her to the hospital. And he wanted Amy's dad to come pick up Joe and watch him while they went. So her dad went back to the house to pick up Joe. And he actually saw Amy this time resting in her room. And she looked horrible. So both Stephen and Amy's father tried to convince her she needed to go to the hospital. But she insisted, I'm fine. I just need to rest. I just need to sleep it off. And she was supposed to lead a dog training class at her house at 4:45 that day. But by 4:45, she still wasn't feeling better, so another trainer actually ran the class for her. Stephen went to check on her at around 5 p.m., according to him, and found her kneeling by the bed. He said he assumed that she was praying, and he left to go pick up Joe from his grandparents' house. On the way home, they stopped at a local fast food restaurant, Culver's, one of my favorites. And when they got home later that night, Joe was excited to see his mom, and he ran inside of the house while Joe unpacked the car and kind of just settled things in the mudroom. But Joe came running back to his dad and said, "Why is mommy laying on the floor?" The scene was gruesome. Amy was found lying face up, and she had a gunshot wound to her head. Nearby her body was a 9mm handgun, and a faint trail of blood led from the door to her body. She was still warm, but she didn't have a pulse. So Stephen quickly called 911, and he told the operator that he thought that his wife had shot herself. And if I had a list of the weirdest 911 calls, I think that this call would make either number 1 or number 2 for sure. And the reason is because you can hear her little son Joe, in the background throughout the majority of the call. But the really weird part is that he says to his dad, "Are you going to remarry?" What? And then his dad's response, Stephen's response is, "I don't know, bud." And he just kind of chuckles a little bit. They're in the middle of a crisis where they just found their wife and mother dead, and they're having this back and forth about him remarrying while he's on the phone with 911. Freaking weird. But anyways, at first glance, it did look like a suicide. But almost nothing about the scene made sense as they started taking a closer look. There was no suicide note, no hesitation wounds, and Amy, who was deeply religious like we talked about, had always told others that suicide was against her beliefs. Her family was adamant she would never take her own life. So a sergeant on the scene looked up police calls that were made to the residents and found out about the attempts that had been made to take out a hit on Amy's life. So she immediately calls the detective at Cottage Grove Police, and he handled the investigations. His name was Detective McAllister, and she shared this information that she had found. And he was kind of confused about why she was calling him about this apparent suicide. That isn't something that he normally handled as a detective, because suicides are usually pretty cut and dry. But after getting more information, he himself actually remembered these threats that had been made. So he quickly goes to the Allwine house to kind of take in the scene. And the first thing that he notices is that the house smells of pumpkin. Remember that she had put the pumpkin in the slow cooker earlier in the day? And that strikes him as kind of odd because he said people rarely start dinner before carrying out plans to take their own life. There was also blood on the inside and the outside of the bedroom. There was also this weird film on the floor just outside of the bedroom that looked like it had recently been cleaned and there was still residue from the cleaner. And it was the only spot in the house that was like this. The rest of the house had they had 2 big dogs. There was dog hair everywhere. It just was not cleaned like this one particular spot. She also had some strange drops of blood next to her that could only be explained by dripping off of something that had been held above her in the air. So Stephen contacts Amy's parents, and they, along with Amy's brother, come to the house. And while they're there, they tell detectives, somehow it comes up in conversation talking with them, that Amy was right-handed, which was weird because the gun was actually found next to her left elbow. They also described her as being a very happy person. And because of all of these just weird clues, Detective McAllister starts to suspect that this is not just a basic suicide. And he decides that he needs a second opinion. So he calls the State Bureau of Apprehension, and they sent an agent to the scene. Some other officers took Stephen and Joe to the station where they got DNA taken, their fingerprints, and tested for gunshot residue. The investigators from the SBA spoke to the neighbors and also the people that were at the house for the dog training class to see if anything stuck out to them or if they had heard anything weird, any weird noises. And the dog training class students said that near the end of their class, they heard a noise that sounded like screeching tires, like somebody was driving away quickly. And a neighbor on the street actually said the same thing. Another neighbor said that he thought that it was weird that he saw smoke coming from the Allwine's chimney. It was November, but it was actually an unseasonably warm November. Like, people were wearing short sleeve shirts. Nobody else had their fire going, so he thought that was weird. After spraying for luminol, they were able to determine that there had been blood in the hallway just outside of the bedroom that somebody had stepped in and tracked bloody footprints up and down the hallway, and then they'd attempted to clean it up. So this made it pretty clear that Amy's death was not a suicide, but it was a murder. 2 weeks later, Stephen's asked to come back in for an interview, and this time he brings his attorney and his pastor with him. And during this 2-hour interview, Stephen was pretty quiet. He was cooperative and he answered all of their questions, but he couldn't explain the blood in the hallway. Nobody had injured themselves recently in that area. And he said that he had no idea what the dark web even was before the FBI had visited their home earlier that year, which doesn't really make sense to me because, hello, he works in IT. Like, you think he doesn't know about that? But anyways, he also said that he had no idea what travel plans had been made for her dog competitions, and he said that Amy hadn't had an affair of any kind. But that is when a shocking truth comes out. Stephen was actually the one having an affair. This marriage counselor, church-going man, who on the surface was a devout husband and father, was living this whole double life behind the scenes, one that revolved around affairs and deception and digital manipulation. Stephen was actually active on Ashley Madison, which, if you didn't know, is a site for people that are seeking extramarital affairs. And he had dozens of accounts under fake names. He had met a woman named Michelle Woodbury, and she was a small blonde woman in her 40s who was married, but she was actually in an open marriage. So they started seeing each other in October of 2015, and they started secretly meeting up, mostly while Amy was away at these dog training competitions. And when they met up, Michelle said that Stephen never spoke about his faith, and she didn't even know that he was a preacher until she Googled him, and that information came up. By February 2016, their relationship had kind of started to cool down. It was starting to dwindle. And the last time that they were intimate was April of 2016. After that, they didn't meet up again until they went to lunch in September. And that was when Stephen told Michelle about all of these dark web threats that had been made on Amy's life. So he tells the police all about this affair, or as he calls it, fling. And he insists that none of this information has to do with the case, and Michelle had nothing to do with it. He also didn't want his pastor or Amy's parents to know about it. Him and Joe actually were getting ready to move in with Amy's parents so that they could all be together and kind of just support each other during this difficult time. So around this time, the FBI sent Amy's file to the Cottage Grove Police Department, and that was the first time that they really got to see like all of the messages that I read earlier and knew the full extent of this online threat made on her life. And the police department was really out of their depth here. They hadn't really had a case like this, but one of the detectives decided to Google the username from the dark web, the Dog Day God username, and he found that someone with that same account name had made 2 posts on Dream Market. Now, Dream Market is basically like eBay for the dark web and like illegal things. So he let Detective McAllister know, and he looked up the posts. The first post was looking for a drug dealer and asking for help with a job. And whoever responded must be willing to be paid in Bitcoin. There was no responses on that one. The second post was asking if anyone sold scopolamine, and that is a drug that's used to treat motion sickness. Some of the side effects include dizziness, drowsiness, dry mouth. It can also affect your memory and cause people to be pliable and susceptible to suggestion. This is a really powerful sedative, and sometimes it's even called devil's breath. So Detective McAllister contacts the medical examiner and asks them to specifically look for this drug in Amy's system. And surprise, surprise, Amy had scopolamine in her system. And not just had it in her system, she had 40 times the dose used for motion sickness. So she was heavily drugged when she died. And there's no way she could have fired the gun. This was not a suicide. So after learning this, Stephen becomes their number one suspect. They seized all of his electronic devices, 66 to be exact. And because he worked in IT, they knew that he would know how to hide his movements on the internet that he didn't want other people to see. So after an extensive search involving many experts, they found that Stephen was having more than just one affair. They also found that he had used encrypted browsers like Tor to access the dark web, which, remember, he said he didn't even know what that was. And forensic analysis eventually showed that he had visited the Besa Mafia site. The emails to the hitman were tracked back to his IP address at the Allwine home. And even worse, investigators discovered Bitcoin transactions that matched the amounts paid to the Besa Mafia, again, from accounts linked to Stephen. He'd also looked up Amy's life insurance policy, a $700,000 policy on one of the computers that was taken as well, and he was the sole beneficiary of that policy. In August of 2016, Stephen had backed up his iPhone to iTunes, and he didn't realize when he backed it up that his entire phone backed up to the cloud. And buried in all of that was a note that he had written that had a series of 34 random letters and numbers. And 26 seconds later, that same string of letters and numbers was sent to the Besa Mafia. This string of letters and numbers was his Bitcoin wallet ID, and it was sent to the Besa Mafia to prove that he had paid for the hit. So this note was actually deleted 1 minute later, but by chance, like this is like a 1 in a million chance, it had already been backed up to the cloud. Each Bitcoin wallet is unique, and so that proved that Dog Day God was without a doubt Stephen Allwine. When the hitman plot failed, prosecutors said that Stephen decided to finish the job for himself. Both of the companies that he worked for said he didn't log into their systems after noon on the day that the murder occurred, despite him claiming that he was working all day. So they think that he laced Amy's food with scopolamine, waited until she was nearly unconscious, then shot her in the head and staged the scene to look like a suicide, placing the gun near her body and creating this whole fake timeline to make himself look innocent. His alibi was weak, but the digital evidence was not, and Stephen Allwine was arrested in January of 2017. He was charged with second-degree murder, which that struck me as odd because second-degree murder is not premeditated, which obviously this whole thing was. He had been planning it for months. He paid his bail of $500,000 and he had to wear an ankle monitor and was only allowed to have supervised visits with his son. He was arrested again 2 weeks later for attempting to contact his son, even though he was only allowed these supervised visits. And bail this time was set at $600,000. Again, he paid it, but he wasn't allowed to have any contact with his son. In March of 2017, a grand jury raised the charge from second-degree murder to first-degree murder. Thank you. And they set the bail at $1 million, which Stephen could not pay this time, and he remained in jail until January of 2018. So in January of 2018, Stephen Allwine stood trial for the murder of his wife, and he pled not guilty. The prosecutors laid out the motive. Stephen wanted out of the marriage, but divorce would shame him in his church. Murder, he believed, would set him free. This is so crazy because it's like, okay, divorce is shamed in his church, but murder isn't? Like, in what world does he think that murdering somebody is a lesser crime or a lesser charged sin in the eyes of God and the eyes of the church than murder? They presented a mountain of evidence, including the Bitcoin transactions, metadata from his laptop, and of course, that damning internet search history. And a positive gunshot residue test also showed that Stephen had gunshot residue on his right hand. His socked feet matched the bloody footprints found using luminol. The evidence was just all there, plain as day. So the jury didn't take long, and Stephen Allwine was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his final words to the court, he said very little. There was no remorse, no apology. He retained that he was completely innocent. Amy Allwine's death wasn't just a tragedy, but it was a betrayal of trust on a just devastating scale. Her church mourned her, her family grieved her, but they also spoke out, not just about the man who betrayed her, but about the woman she was, resilient, faithful, and undeserving of such a cruel fate. Her young son, now growing up without either parent, is being raised by family. And really, there is no winners in this story. Just warnings about the secrets people hide, about how digital footprints can both endanger and reveal, and about how evil can disguise itself in the plainest, most familiar faces. Thank you so much for joining me for this case this week. This was just a crazy one to me. There's so many crazy things about this story. I'd love to know what you guys think about this case. Let me know on the post for this episode on my Instagram, which is She Investigates Podcast. And I will be back with another episode next week. In the meantime, I'll keep snooping so you don't have to. This is She Investigates, signing off.